Thank you for the survivors who are still in here, who brave the day. Thank you also to the presenters for this very stimulating day. Just as Björn this afternoon, I also have to confess a certain ignorance to the topic. Well, by the way, my name is Raphael Himmelsbach. I'm a coordinator for responsible research and innovation at the Center for Digital Life Norway. And I deal more with science society issues. And Alex has asked me if I could facilitate this debate today. And so let's try what we can get out of it. Just before I pass the word to the floor for questions, I want to start a bit with some context. So this week is a special week. Does anybody know what week it is?
It's Antibiotic Awareness Week.
Very well. And I'm sure it was an ingenious planning of the organizers to put the debate or this event during this week. If not, it's a very fortunate circumstance, because indeed raising awareness is one of the key points in the action plan that the World Health Organization has established in 2015. Now, before we start further debate, I was a bit curious to learn from the panel. So we have this World Health document, we have other national strategies, and today we had presentations from the very small to the very large in terms of from the lab, from sequence similarity networks up to public health debates. And I was curious to learn a bit, how do these larger concerns shape the work of the panelists? If we could just take a round, and then we'll open the floor for other questions.
Okay, am I supposed to start then?
That's a good idea.
Okay. Well, I'm one of the people who works on the floor, not in society. And for me, of course, to see the need of the results that we are generating by our research, by society, and that we as scientists can provide vital information to society in order to tackle this, what is it called? Nasty problem of antimicrobial resistance. Yes, it is nasty because it isn't fixed by one thing. It is fixed by making a series of changes. And in that series, we are just a small part. But you know how it is. In a machine, even the smallest wheel has its function. And if it isn't there, perhaps the machine doesn't work. So yes, we do think of these societal aspects. And it also gives us the necessary push when science goes against us, and it does sometimes, despite what the impression that the very skilled speakers today give the impression of, it does go against us. And in those circumstances, it's very important to have that push that the things we are doing is worth doing and should be done.
So how does it reflect to us? So we are typically in a daily business in the dirt. So we are trying to find the new solutions. The political and societal pressure induces sort of a larger number of academic proposals in the antibacterial area. So we are more frequently asked to contribute to antibacterial programs in combined grant applications whatsoever. So here's the problem which I face, because I'm not just responsible for these collaborations and to actually mature these collaborations to make them a success, but I'm also responsible for selling off these programs. So I really need the pull solution, which I don't quite see at the very moment, because even the transferable vouchers or the market entry reward, that's like not yet there. And the reality is that my customers, as of today, they vanish. So they disappear, like the big pharmas, and even the small biotechs, which are stepping out of the antibacterial field. So yes, we support these ground applications, we collaborate, but we can't do too many, because otherwise our business is going to fail, at least in the short term. So I don't really have a solution. I'm actually asking for some support here.
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this meeting. I think it is extremely important to bring people from both sides, because as a researcher, I'm usually interested, and also my group, just you find new molecules, and what is happening after that, it's not my business, right? And hearing today these talks after, in the second part of this workshop, it is extremely important to see what is going after that, what is beyond the discovery. And this is, of course, it's not new to me, of course, because I think in Germany, I'm part of the Helmholtz Institute of Pharmaceutical Research, whose major goal is development of new antimicrobials. And in Germany, there's a huge governmental initiative to support this with governmental money. There's a huge amount of support, hundreds of millions of euros going to German Center of Infection Research. This is a virtual center where major institutions working in this area combine efforts together to combat this problem. So, and this will be extended obviously, and it is on the governmental level supported very strongly because of what we discussed, the industrial disinterest. But and this center of infectious research, they are also organizing such meetings, bringing together different stakeholders. And I think this is extremely important, not just leave, for example, scientists alone in their labs and then digging somewhere in soil, finding some new molecules, putting on the shelf and forgetting this, like was presented from 70s, 60s, having wonderful molecules. But to bring this awareness to society, to discuss with people like you today, brought this problem in the broader perspective, right? And then I like this idea, what you discussed, and I think it is give me also other motivation from other angle to look on that with the molecules which will be efficient but will wait their times to be introduced quickly as possible if necessary, right? And this I think is extremely interesting idea which I thought about this, and of course bringing this together, different stakeholders will help us to push this and to combat this reason a big problem that we have today. So thank you.
Yes, I think I would just say a little bit about what's the idea of the of setting up this this conference here, or this workshop, because Jon Sigurd and I, we were discussing that this is a very it's a global problem, it's a multi-layered problem, and it can only be addressed by working together, talking together, and looking at the whole story and see, okay, what are the best solutions together. So I myself, as a scientist in a similar situation as Jon Sigurd or Andri, I'm very much motivated that my research, which I'm doing, actually leads to something. So we are paid by society, and I want to give something back to society. In this case of antimicrobial resistance or new bioactive compounds or antibiotics, it is that there's obviously an obstacle, and the question is, how can we as scientists on the floor, on the first stage of a development, how can we probably help to giving meaning to the science we are doing, and by setting up such a workshop like we have here with the discussions, I think it's an important step actually to bring us a step forward towards a solution. So this was my personal motivation for setting this up.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. It is a very important workshop to set up, and I think for me it is very encouraging to see that there is a lot of research going on the early stages, and that there are a lot of substances that are potential cures for some of the infections. What is a bit disencouraging is to see that there is it's been mentioned the valley of death, building the bridge onto to the market. there is not really a valley because there is not really a market, and that is what we really need to fix, and we really need to build this market so you have somewhere to build that bridge. That is my take of this workshop today.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to apologize if I came off as negative before. That was not my intention. So actually, I think we should all be very pleased because people are talking about antibiotic resistance. We have gained so much awareness. It's up at the United Nations now. It's only the 4th ever medical topic to come up at the UN. They've got an interagency coordination group working on this right now, so we're looking forward to the recommendations from that group. You have Arne Solberg understands antibiotic resistance. She stands up and talks about this. I mean, there is a level of awareness that is better than ever before, and we are seeing results as well. The push money has doubled in the last couple of years. I mean, that's huge, and that's making the pipeline better, so that should be good for you researchers because there is much more interest in funding potential antibiotic candidates, diagnostics, vaccines, alternative therapies. So I think that this is actually, we should look at this as something that the world is working together on and it is solvable. Norway is working with China right now, looking at efforts to combat antibiotic resistance there and collaboration methods. We're working with many countries on this aspect. So I think I know it would be nice if we had the pull. The pull, we need to get there. We need to get the pull mechanism in place, but we've just put a whole lot of push in place as well, and that's a lot of money paying up front. So we have to give a little bit of time for governments to react to this. Now, the midterm elections are over in the US, so maybe there's some discussions there about pull mechanisms coming that will also influence the market. So I think it is actually, we're going in the right direction. This is something that we can work together and we can solve. So I think that we should look at this as, we've made some success, but we have to go farther. We haven't solved everything yet, but we are going in the right direction.
It's beautiful, like in a panel, the question slightly shifts and it makes my work a lot easier. So after having passed this first milestone, now the second is to elicit questions from the audience.
I have a question on the pull mechanism. So as I understand at the moment, the pull mechanisms are more on the stage of just an idea. So I was wondering if there have been discussions not only with governments but also with industries and how the industries are reacting to these ideas. And the second part of my question is, so the idea is that we give money to we compensate the industries, the big pharmas, for marketing these new antibiotics. But is there any way of compensating the countries or the governments that they are going to pay all this money for compensating the farmers? Thank you.
So I can say that the Drive AB report was a public-private partnership financed through the Innovative Medicines Initiative. So we wrote that report with the 6 pharmaceutical companies that were active, large pharmaceutical companies that were active in the space at that time. So there's been a lot of conversation between the private sector, the public sector, and the civil society. So those conversations are ongoing and positive. The second question was, how to compensate. So so we're looking at some of the financing mechanisms which aren't incredibly popular with the pharmaceutical industry, but some of the mechanisms are looking at how do you tax pharmaceuticals as well, because you could say that antibiotics are needed to have a certain level of care within the healthcare sector. You need it to do chemotherapy, you need it to do surgeries, you need it's one of your main tools in the healthcare sector. So whereas the pharmaceutical industry is earning large margins on chemotherapy and other options, we could utilize this as a taxation base in order to finance the pull mechanism. That's one of the ideas.
So yeah, this has been discussed and debated with the pharmaceutical industry as well. And so these 2 options that I mentioned here, the transferable patent exclusivity just further exclusivity.
Voucher.
Thank you. And it is in the IFPMA policy. IFPMA is the International Pharmaceutical Industry Association. So they are also behind this. So both of these pull mechanisms are supported by the industry.
Other questions? Yes?
Talking about this One Health, that is always, you have to tackle this from many different angles, like from the animal side, from human health, finding new antibiotics or new vaccines. Do you think that we are within this are competing against each other? Like somebody saying, don't bother finding new antibiotics, just focus on vaccines. Are you thinking that this could destroy or not working in the same direction?
Yes and no. There are some. There are actually some physicians that I've spoken to who have said that we don't really need any more new antibiotics, but they are. Well, there are just a few of them that are very vocal about it. But I don't really think that it necessarily competes with the development of new vaccines and the other weapons that we can use. But so, not really. I don't think that there is too much of a competition.
Sorry, I think there is actually.
This
is a huge. It's you know, you get into these global meetings and the stewardship people say, well, you know, we can make a huge amount of difference. Just give us 100 million, and innovation says give us $1 billion per antibiotic, right? And so we look like the big greedy. Part of antibiotic resistance. So OECD released a report, maybe you saw it this week. It showed the stewardship interventions as well as infection prevention control. They'll pay for themselves and limit antibiotic resistance dramatically. So this is always a competition, but the thing is that we can't, we have to fund stewardship, we have to fund infection prevention control for both animals and humans. And we have to look at surveillance, of course, as well, and access. But the thing is, we're still losing 37,000 Europeans every year from antibiotic resistance. So those people need new treatment. So they probably, maybe the cost seems some unbalanced. But the thing is that we still need to look at all 5 pillars of antibiotic resistance, is my opinion. So.
Any more questions? Gustav?
Yeah, I was just curious. Within Christine, you mentioned in the talk that you had this kind of pilot projects and discussing mechanisms. This might be a bit of a naive question, but has there been any discussions there where sort of the notion of the market is not part of it? That this maybe is not something that we can develop through the market. It seems to create all these kind of problems. So. Why isn't that part of the discussion? Maybe this shouldn't be sort of developed in traditional market mechanisms.
There's many that say that. So that's not a naive aspect at all. So this is something that's been brought up. I think REACT in Sweden is particularly keen on that option. But the thing is, are we willing to pay all of the money that we need for innovation, knowing that 98% of the products that start will fail? So you have to increase. So maybe not in the early phases, but when you look at clinical trials.
Even in the later phases.
Well, he'll argue with you on that. I'll let you two argue on that.
Argue because the pharmaceutical industry, of course, is competing with one another, and all these failures are a result of the lemming behavior. That if they have one program, then the next 10 companies have the same program. If this one program fails, all the remaining 10 are failing as well for good reasons. So this is a lot of money which is wasted in a sense, and this is why I would argue for a public solution, particularly in the field of antibacterials.
If you look at the neglected tropical disease space, this is the way that it goes with neglected tropical diseases. So if you're looking for new medicines for schistosomiasis, you're only getting development aid money. That's it. No, there's no private sector money going into that. And we don't see increases. We don't see new products coming out. It is a very it's not a competitive space, and we just don't see the innovation. So I think you would have to be willing to increase dramatically the amount of push money. We're not talking 500 million per year, we're talking billions per year, and then you would have to look to see how you get, but I'll send it down. Sorry.
Actually, before we continue, Johanna has a question.
I think it's a strange comment to say if you want to pay, we pay anyhow. So
Yes.
I don't understand that argument. And I think that it's not an issue of pushing. And if I understand your question, could we find a pipeline without pushing big pharma and optimize pipelines together? So that would be the issue, and not pushing pharma to do things for us, but do it ourselves and then buy their competence when necessary.
I really like that comment, because I also believe that the solution is collaboration and international collaboration, particularly in that field. I don't quite understand why one wants to push pharma into a direction where they don't want to be. Because I've been working with the former Sanofi, and I witnessed the fate of the sleeping disease drug, which they actually donated to the WHO for good reasons, because there was no market. And I think the same is true as it is currently for the antibacterials. And this is why I strongly believe we should find an alternative to the existing mechanisms in pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry is good where it is, where the market exists, but in this space I don't really see it as of today.
Just a one short comment. So I think we should probably choose the words when we speak about failure and wasting, because what does it mean that antibiotic or certain compound failed? That means that hundreds of scientists' work, that we generated a lot of value in terms of fundamental research, biosynthesis, regulation, small molecules, synthesis, methodology, platform, that we have employed many highly qualified, educated people who trained and so on, so on. So I think that if you look at it in a broader perspective, that is not a waste of money, I would say, right? So this or other way, we are investing into research, right? And this is very high, very often difficult to predict where it will end up. Yeah, we have many examples like CRISPR-Cas9 that was like 40 years forgotten and so on. So I think this is that if we are just choosing the words not like a failure and wasting money, but other just we are investing money into fundamental research, by the way. So if the compound I'm developing, so to say, failed to become an antibiotic, there is a huge value behind in terms of data, research, employment, and etc. Yeah.
Maybe I have a quick another comment, because you may know the numbers for the German consortium of antimicrobial research DIETSI. So they received, I don't know, a ton of money.
Hundreds, millions, I think.
I heard something about 500 million,
Yeah.
only the German consortium.
Yeah.
I would ask for the delivery of one drug in exchange.
I think I know a little bit inside from that, and I know that there's extremely important antibiotics in development. So and now they are in discussion with the big pharma. So because they went through the preclinical trials on a relatively late stage with a relatively low toxicity, etc. of new scaffolds, not only some derivatives of tetracycline. So there are movement in this direction for sure.
So just to answer your comment, it is not, you're not really pushing the big pharma. It is not the big pharma obligation to take on these products. It is up to anyone. Anyone can take these compounds and develop them further, and bring them to the market, and deliver them to the world. But big pharma does play a role here. It is the big pharma that we have the competence on commercializing products, on doing the clinical trials, creating this documentation up to regulatory standards, and it isn't many other organizations than the big pharma who are actually able to do that. So it is a natural role that these companies do play. So yeah, it is not. But as I said, it is not. It doesn't have to be a big pharma company to take these drugs to the market. Anyone can do that.
So I would just say that we're not paying for it anyways, because most of the companies that innovate are not big pharma. In fact, I'm not sure there's really, I think there's one big pharma who's innovating right now. But so it's small companies, and mostly they're financed by venture capital. So we heard someone earlier talk about Atlas is funding their initiative, right? So Novo Nordisk is funding, this is private money. And so what you want to do is you want to find the balance between the public and the private money so that you have more investments in the private sector. So people are investing in this thinking that maybe a pull mechanism will come and they will earn more money. But if not, they could lose money as well if the science means that the product doesn't reach the market. So I agree. All investments in the science are well worth it, even though if we find that it's a dead end. But there is a difference, and if you think that you're going to put this entirely in the public sector, you need to go and talk to the Norwegian finance minister and say that they've got to, I don't know, 5 times more invest in antibiotics, it could be very expensive, and it's also according to political whims about the investment, so it makes it a bit precarious.
I just want to take 1 or 2 more questions. I'm sure we'll stay around that topic, yes?
Yeah, it's a lot about pulling and pushing with money, but one important stakeholder is also the health authorities, and they have been excluded more or less up to now. And the paradox thing is, when you will file for a new antibiotic, it will be a reserve antibiotic with limited access to the market. And that's requested then by the health authority. But on the other hand, the health authorities, they want the new antibiotic to be almost as safe as an OTC or as safe as an immunosuppressant. And that is not really necessary, because those people who do not get the reserve antibiotic will die. So it can be almost chemotherapeutic from the side effects. So, and they are, as I have the impression, like with the phage therapy, there was a lot of development around 2005. Yeah, 2005, and it was just a very dusty old bureaucracy that hasn't adapted, that was not proactive at all. So I personally, I'm convinced that the health authorities have to change their bureaucracy and their requirements. But what is your opinion on that?
I can say that FDA and EMA are actively working now to find new regulatory pathways for alternative technologies. So there's a lot of exciting work going on there right now, because they know that the current clinical development trial structure doesn't work for alternative therapies. So I think that there's a lot going on, and we can expect to see dramatic improvements. EMA is much more flexible than the FDA is, but I think that we should be happy and think that these changes are coming.
Let me also comment about the health technology assessments, because there are alternative therapies coming, and currently they are not taking into account the value of antibiotic resistance. It is not really being assessed in the HTA assessments. So that is also something that we really need to develop and discuss and have more thoughts around, because the alternative therapies do have a value on top of the of curing the patients. It has a societal value as well for not using antibiotics and reducing the occurrence of antibiotic resistance.
Maybe just very short comments. I like your comments very much, because if you would consider what you say, that maybe nowadays such antibiotics, established antibiotics like, for example, gentamicin or chloramphenicol, they would never reach the market, never. And for many people, those are the last resort, last defense, right? This strong aminoglycosides, which are extremely toxic. But if you have this choice, that's why I think it is really interesting and important comment.
We're almost out of time, and I would like to use my prerogative as a moderator for one last question. So we've been talking a lot today about pharmaceuticals and the markets, or the absence of markets, but we also heard this analogy this afternoon that antimicrobial resistance is more like climate change in terms of a problem, that we have temporary victories, but even if we find effective antibiotics, the effects will have a very long time lag. So if we could broaden the perspective a bit towards the end, Where would be avenues for research, but also for finding business models, be in order to try to look at the problem in this broader perspective?
You're looking at me. I could at least try. Of course, the problem here is that a patient wants to be cured for the infection. That is the patient's perspective. And the pharmaceutical industry is well adapted to care for patients. So they develop products that care for patients, and the patient gets perhaps well, which perhaps is not good for the pharmaceutical industry because they lose their customer. But on the other hand, that is a success story. What really makes this model unsustainable is that the cure of one patient comes to a cost, not for the patient, but for the society. The environment will be affected by treatment of each patient. That is not usually a part of the business model, patient pharmaceutical industry. Now you begin to pull in the other factors in here, because resistance development, nobody really wants it. It just comes. It's unavoidable as we think of it, as it is today. And that makes the classical delivery customer relationship faulty, because you have this third factor. What happens with the environment? What happens with the other people that doesn't use this antibiotic but still may suffer from it in the future when they need it? And I think that is the pharmaceutical industry is well aware of that. And that is also a complicating factor why pharmaceutical industry really won't touch that area. So we can make all kinds of pull and pushes. I think that the pharmaceutical industry will find usually better use of their funds in other fields than antibiotics. Antibiotics is not actually just a patient problem, it is a societal problem, and I think the society should actually take care of that problem. So I agree with the people who says that perhaps the business model is so bad for the pharmaceutical industry that whatever trick we can try to fix it won't really fix it. Perhaps society should take care. And I would say, I wouldn't look at the Norwegian finance minister. I would look at the finance ministers in Europe, in the US, in every developed country who has lots of money, to say that this is actually the same kind of problems we have as in climate change. We have to do something together. And the pharmaceutical industry, sorry Bert, the pharmaceutical industry would certainly play a role here. But perhaps their role would be as kind of a service provider for the society, because they know, as is said here, that they know the way how to develop a drug. Society doesn't know that. But they don't have any business model here. So perhaps they will do this as a kind of a service for fee for society.
I don't mean to sound negative, and I'm not depressed, but I think I completely agree to Sigurd's statement in a way. I think we have to find novel ways in the field of the antibacterials. I also do not see at the very moment the business model for the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, again, I'm sort of describing this a bit in a black and white fashion. The best drug for the pharmaceutical industry is the one which doesn't cure the patient, but which turns the disease into a chronic disease, as a matter of fact, because that's where we earn most of the money. And that's even true for our organization, because then we get higher licensing fees. So that's, and this doesn't really apply to the field of antimicrobials, antibacterials, where you can actually eradicate the disease on the spot. I'm a bit worried because I think what we see in the field of the antibacterials, antimicrobials could also become true at some point for cancer, because you see the same kind of resistance formation there. The cancer cells acquire resistance to the treatments, so maybe the sooner or later the health system will also not be able anymore to cover the costs there, because these are really becoming more and more expensive treatments. I wonder where this is going, but maybe the antibacterial field can actually provide a blueprint here.
Well, okay, I'm going to have to disagree with you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Because, well, a treatment that cures a patient does have a lot more value than just turning a disease into being chronic. And this is a part of the cost effectiveness analysis that is being done for every drug. The better the effect, the higher the price that the society can pay. And I think also that this is the solution that we can use for antibiotics. If we can have also include the societal value into the price of the drug, then it will make a viable business for the pharmaceutical industry. So I think it is possible to solve within, sort of within today's model. I don't really think that we need state pharmaceutical companies to do this.
I think the preclinical pipeline is stronger now than it's been in a long time, thanks to the push money that's being put in there. I think we've got a lot of upcoming potential antibiotics and alternative therapies that can meet some of the most unmet public health need right now. I think we're going forward, and I think that there is a willingness to test various models. If we don't fix the pull now, the pull will certainly fix itself, because the market will, as we see more resistant infections, the market will be created. Now, we don't want that. Nobody wants that. But I think that there is a lot happening. There's a lot of awareness. We have awareness at the highest levels in the leaders of the nations through the UN. So I think we should be a little bit more optimistic that we are making significant progress here. If we continue to lose the number of companies that we see right now, then I think we're going to have to be more creative in looking at public sector solutions. But I think we want to get the best cost benefit for our tax dollars out there as well. So if you can get the private sector to pay 50%, and I'm not talking about big pharmaceutical companies here, I'm talking about small companies that are funded through venture capital. If we can get them to pay 50% and we can pay the other 50%, that's a much better return on our investment. So I'm optimistic. I think we're going in the right direction. I know that we could always do things in a quicker fashion, but I think we are getting there.
We're actually out of time, and sometimes it's best to leave a stimulating debate with the agreement to disagree until the next time we have a chance to debate again. And I also suggest that we stay right here so that Jon Sigurd can deliver his closing remarks.
Thank you. My closing remarks is the following. The antibiotic crisis is real. We may debate how grave it is, how large it is, but there is no doubt that if no steps are taken, we are going in a very wrong direction. We can then begin to speculate why we are in this situation, and this is a nasty problem. I like that word. I use it many times. We have this tragedy of commons, that antibiotics are unique among drugs in the way that they benefit one party, but they may harm the other parties in the field. So this makes antibiotics quite special. I think we should regard them as quite special solutions to a medical problem. We have heard that the business model, at least as it is by today, is not working. It's not sustainable, it's not working. And it's complicated with this tripartite the patient, the society, and the pharmaceutical industry that doesn't really have aligned agendas or common goals even. And we have then an item which hasn't really been debated much. We have touched upon it, but that is the use of antibiotics not to cure infections. 70% of all antibiotics are used not to cure infections. We should be ashamed of ourselves to say that loud. It isn't really sustainable, and it's really bad for society, for our children, for the future. But I agree with those who say that we shouldn't really dig ourselves down to a kind of a pessimistic hole and just cover our head and hope for the best. And I think that the two representatives from the Norwegian Cancer Society, in particular Helge Øvrenes, reminds me and reminds us all that we do have to act. There is no option not to act here. But how are we going to do this? Well, we have heard that the pipeline is good, and what we have heard about the new technologies today actually reinforces my strength in believing that the future, when it comes to be able to deliver new compounds from academia, is good. We have also heard that there are in place mechanisms that can cover the valley of death, which isn't really a valley. There is no market, so there is no other part of the bridge. So that also has to be fixed. So actually what it turns out to be, based on the impression that I have by today, is that we have many pieces in the puzzle in place, and many of these pieces are being better and better. But there are still some really vacant spots in this picture. And we don't know really how to fill them. There are different ways of thinking how to fill them. And I really appreciate that we don't agree on how to fill them. Because if we agreed on how to fill them, I begin to be very skeptical again. Because there is obviously no solution to this problem. There are lots of solutions, and we should explore as many as we can of them. And with that, I more or less conclude like Raphael proposes. Let's conclude by being not agreeing, but let's meet next time and see how far we have progressed on each of our part. Because I think that this is a problem that cannot be solved by one person, by a group of persons. This is a problem that has to be solved by common effort. And it's always dangerous with common efforts if all agrees on the direction. You can have the lemming effect that has been described here. Let's avoid the lemming effect. Let's really work to solve all these problems with the means we can and push the politicians and other leaders to lead us in the right way.